Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Eric Lyle Williams? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Eric Lyle Williams was born on April 7, 1967, and grew up in Alvin, Texas. This is south of Houston. In 1971, Eric's family home caught fire and burned to the ground, but he was not injured. In 1974, the family moved to a farm in a small town outside of Fort Worth, Texas. Eric was a Boy Scout and enjoyed hiking and camping. In 1981, he reached the level of Eagle Scout. He performed well academically in school. He was interested in math and engineering, and he played the trumpet. He used to carry a briefcase to class and was described as aloof. He mostly spent his time with other good students. After graduating from high school in 1985, Eric attended Texas Christian University and studied criminal justice. He also entered the ROTC. Eric graduated with a bachelor's degree in May 1989. He wanted to have a military career, but he was not offered a job in the regular army. It was suspected that he did not demonstrate a sense of urgency. It just seemed like Eric wasn't that motivated. He ended up taking a position in the Army Reserve and pursuing a career in law enforcement. Eric became a police officer in a suburb of Fort Worth. He was fired 8 months later for disobeying orders. He accepted another position as a police officer, this time in a smaller police department about an hour away, but he was once again fired. He allegedly accessed a computer system without permission. It looks like he was trying to hide the fact that he didn't complete an assigned patrol. The chief of the department thought it was unusual because Eric had the skills to erase any evidence that he was in the computer, but he left identifying information there, almost like he wanted to be caught. In November 1993, Eric moved to Kaufman County, southeast of Dallas, Texas. In March 1994, he found a job as a court coordinator. He was like a helper to a judge. He would manage the judge's schedule, set trial dates, and take care of other tasks. Eric became very close to the judge, and the judge supported his career for many years. In the fall of 1995, Eric, now 28 years old, started law school in Fort Worth. In 1996, he met a woman named Kim. They would marry on May 13, 1998. About a year later, Eric graduated from law school. He would receive his license to practice law in Texas in November 1999. He opened his own practice not long after this. Eric's wife, Kim, developed rheumatoid arthritis and had difficulty working, but Eric was making a lot of money. In 2001, they purchased a 2,800 square foot house in an upscale community. In Eric's role as an attorney, he was accepting a number of court-appointed cases. Eventually, he started to specialize in family law. He received a lot of cases from Child Protective Services specifically, to the point where it was almost like a monopoly. His connections in the court system had paid off. Some people believe that Eric was overbilling for some of the services. He attracted some negative attention because of this, and he was unable to explain all his billable hours. In November 2010, Eric successfully ran for Justice of the Peace in Kaufman County. This means he was a judge, but with limited authority. Eric was paid $48,000 a year and received medical benefits. The benefits were particularly important because he had diabetes and his wife had rheumatoid arthritis. Their medical bills were substantial. The job also had a lot of free time built into it, which meant Eric could pursue private practice work in addition to being paid by the county. Eric didn't really stand out as a justice of the peace, except for the fact that he was interested in updating the technology used by the courts. On May 15, 2011, Eric removed 3 computer monitors from a county building. The monitors were valued at $600 total. They were discovered missing the next day. Surveillance camera video showed that Eric had taken the monitors. He was arrested on May 24. The case against Eric was kind of confusing to law enforcement. Nobody could understand why he had removed the monitors when he simply could have ordered them through the proper channels. Eric told the police that he had taken the monitors to use for county business, but the police believed that they were for personal use. The case was referred to the district attorney's office. Michael McClelland, the district attorney, did not like Eric Williams because Eric had supported a political rival. The men had a long history of animosity. Michael viewed this as his opportunity to get back at Eric. Therefore, he assigned one of his most aggressive prosecutors to the case, a man named Mark Haas. The typical punishment in a case like this would have been deferred prosecution and making restitution, but Mark was instructed to pursue a conviction. Mark was not enthusiastic about the case. He offered Eric a plea deal. He could plead guilty to abuse of office, which was a Class A misdemeanor. He could no longer be a justice of the peace, but he could keep his law license. Eric was suspended as a justice of the peace in June, which put him under financial strain. He was quite worried about losing his license to practice law. He believed this would happen if he accepted the plea deal because the crime involved moral turpitude. Eric decided to make the prosecution a counteroffer. He would pay $600 in restitution and quit his job as a justice of the peace. Michael was furious that Eric thought that he could dictate the terms of his punishment. He ordered Mark to pursue felony charges against Eric. This brought a lot of negative attention to both Michael and Mark. People thought that they were being extremely heavy-handed. For example, around the same time, a county employee had been caught stealing over $120,000. She did not serve a single day in jail. Realizing that their colleagues were turning against them, Michael and Mark launched a smear campaign against Eric. They spoke to every attorney who would listen to them about how terrible and unusual Eric was. They referred to him as bizarre and strange, pointed out how he carried a police scanner, and they called him narcissistic. Their campaign was really about his personality and not about the offenses that he was accused of. Many people believe that Michael and Mark had a vendetta against Eric. It was clear that they were being overzealous in this case. People felt as though Michael specifically did not have a lot of self-control. Something had come over him. He was obsessed with vengeance. Michael and Mark were advised to simply treat Eric's case as they would any other case, but they refused. Eric Williams went to trial in March of 2012. The prosecution brought up another alleged incident involving Eric to demonstrate a pattern of behavior. Eric had ordered some items for personal use, which he billed to the law library. For example, he had ordered a lamp. Eric was convicted of theft by a public servant and burglary of a building. He was sentenced to 80 hours of community service and 2 years probation. He lost his job and his law license. His career in the criminal justice system was permanently over, at least on the side where he would be getting paid for his services. After the conviction, Michael planned on pursuing charges against Eric for the law library theft. Michael told one colleague that he was going to destroy Eric Williams. Even people who had supported Michael up to this point were disgusted by him. Nobody could understand why Michael just couldn't let this go. Eric had already lost everything for behavior that would not have normally resulted in a conviction, and yet Michael was still pushing. Michael wanted Eric to suffer more. Eric felt as though he was being severely mistreated. He thought that Michael would never stop coming for him, which was probably true. Eric had grown to hate both Michael and Mark and developed a homicidal plan to get revenge. Eric looked at Michael's behavior as going too far. Therefore, Eric decided to take things too far. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On January 27, 2013, Eric and his wife Kim purchased a 2001 Mercury Sable for $1,500. It had 235,000 miles on it. The seller thought that it was unusual that Eric didn't even take the car for a test drive. Eric convinced a friend of his to rent a storage unit for him that would not be in his name. He paid for the unit for a year in advance, in cash. In the storage unit, Eric stored the Mercury Sable, over 30 weapons, including firearms and knives, as well as a variety of tactical gear. Eric prepared a costume to wear during his first murder. It was all black and featured a hood with mesh over the face. On January 31, Eric and Kim drove to the courthouse where Mark Haas worked. At 8:38 a.m., Eric confronted Mark next to a parking lot and shot him 3 times with a revolver. He quickly escaped in the Mercury Sable, which Kim was driving. After receiving word of the murder of the Assistant District Attorney Mark Haas, the District Attorney, Michael McLellan, was positive that Eric was behind Mark's murder, but the police didn't have any proof of this. In addition, Michael had been so vindictive and stubborn about prosecuting Eric that many law enforcement officers doubted Michael's judgment. They thought that he accused Eric simply because of the vendetta. Mark was an assistant district attorney. He had prosecuted several dangerous people who may have been looking for revenge. The police visited Eric's house. They found it curious that he answered the door with his arm in a sling, as if he was trying to make it clear he could not have been the shooter. The police tested Eric for gunshot residue, but the result was negative. It appeared as though Eric had been successful at escaping responsibility after committing a homicide, but he was not yet done with his murderous plan. In February 2013, he purchased a Crown Victoria and parked in the storage unit. Since Mark's murder, Michael and his wife Cynthia had been taking a number of precautions. For example, they had a security system installed in their house. Michael had a number of firearms available as well to protect him and his wife. Michael was not really that worried that Eric would come after him. He actually invited Eric to come and try to kill him. Cynthia was more concerned that their lives were in danger. On March 30, 2013, Eric made his way to the house of Michael and Cynthia. He arrived at 6:40 a.m. using the Crown Victoria. Eric was dressed as a police officer and carrying an AR-15 rifle under his jacket. He walked to the front door and rang the doorbell. Cynthia answered the door. Eric pulled out the rifle and started firing. He made entry into the house and continued shooting. He shot Cynthia somewhere between 5 and 8 times, and Michael about 16 times. They did not survive. Eric left the house 2 minutes after entering. The police were now confident that Eric Williams was the killer. They were able to build a case against him. They found the pistol that he used to murder Mark. It was in a lake. They also found the storage unit and a lot of other evidence against Eric and his wife, Kim. Eric was convicted of murder in December of 2014. He was sentenced to death. His wife, Kim, pleaded guilty for her part and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Eric Williams continues to maintain his innocence. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. When Eric was young, he was described as happy, inquisitive, and intelligent. He followed the rules and stayed out of trouble. He had an aversion to getting dirty. For example, he avoided walking barefoot in the grass, refused to play in the dirt, and for a time insisted that his mother dress him in all white. Eric was considered patient, imaginative, and highly invested in fantasy. He enjoyed reading books, watching Star Trek, and playing the game Dungeons and Dragons. He did not show emotions, and he did not have people skills. Despite this, he was somewhat well-liked. People felt as though he had a good sense of humor, never became angry, and was patient. This changed as he grew older, which brings me to item number 2. As a teenager and young adult, Eric became increasingly antisocial. For example, he regularly shot cats on the farm where he lived. He viewed himself as the enforcer of rules. He was rigid, inflexible, and started exhibiting bizarre behavior. People said that he had a look in his eyes where he would stare right through people. Eric considered himself to be superior to other people. He did not talk often, and he always appeared to be listening. So here we see a number of obsessive-compulsive personality traits. He was rigid, inflexible, always wanted to follow the rules, wanted people to do things exactly as he wanted them done, and he had a commitment to perfectionism. Now moving to item number 3. When Eric worked for the judge, he was involved in an incident that should have led to his arrest. Eric was pursuing a woman romantically, and she rejected him. He allegedly threatened her with a .38 caliber revolver that he carried. He suggested that he would use the revolver if she left him because he had nothing else to lose. The woman complained and was told by the judge who Eric worked for that Eric would never bother her again. She would later say that Eric never did. There was no more bad behavior. Item number 4. Over the course of several years, Eric amassed several weapons and a lot of tactical gear. He made it clear that he felt as though he was above the law and could get away with anything. He made a number of strange comments to people about violence. For example, he said that if he ever decided to go out, he would take a bunch of people with him. Not many people took Eric seriously because he seemed harmless and benign. Item number 5. During Eric's time as an attorney, he was described as arrogant and condescending. He joined Mensa, an organization whose only membership requirement is a score on an intelligence test that places a person in the top 2% of the population. Mensa is sometimes thought of as a ploy to trick people into self-identifying as narcissistic, although being narcissistic is not technically required to be in Mensa. Eric displayed his Mensa certificate as if it was some type of educational achievement, which indicated he had no comprehension of how other people perceived him. Despite Eric's grandiosity and arrogance, some people really liked him. Many of his family law clients thought that he was a kind and caring attorney. Sometimes, when they ran short on money, Eric would simply stop billing them. This makes it seem as though Eric was a communal narcissist. He wanted people to appreciate him for his good works. So if he was no longer able to complete good works, this could result in a negative reaction, like he could become angry. That could explain some of what happened in this case. His communal narcissism was threatened, and he did not have anything else to fall back on to support his ego. Now moving to my final item, number 6. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Eric Williams had several narcissistic characteristics, including grandiosity, self-centeredness, lack of empathy, arrogance, and a sense of entitlement. Some of his narcissistic behavior could be described as communal, and some of it could be thought of as vulnerable. Eric's career success as an attorney and as a justice of the peace earned him a lot of credit with the people around him. They forgave some of his negative characteristics, perhaps due to the halo effect. This is where people view an individual with one positive trait as having many positive traits, even if they don't see any evidence for those other positive traits. The district attorney, Michael McClellan, however, viewed Eric negatively after Eric backed a political rival. Michael may have been narcissistic as well. He could see himself reflected in Eric and knew that Eric was arrogant and vindictive. When Eric took the monitors from the county, Michael saw his chance to get revenge. He maliciously prosecuted Eric and dragged Mark into his scheme. Michael was determined to destroy Eric Williams completely. Eric had a chance to minimize the consequences of Michael's vindictiveness by accepting that plea deal, but Eric declined the plea deal. Eric's sense of entitlement was too powerful. He believed his status in the criminal justice system meant that he could get away with anything, including stealing from the county. He was like the character Judge Dredd from the 1995 movie when he said, "I am the law." This situation set up a terrible struggle between two vindictive, petty, arrogant, and irresponsible individuals, Eric and Michael. Sometimes when two narcissists go after each other, there is no limit to how much destruction they will cause to themselves and to others. Often the other people are innocent. Michael was willing to destroy his reputation in order to prosecute Eric. Eric was willing to destroy everything to get revenge. Michael always had a sense that Eric was dangerous, yet he was not ready for Eric when Eric came by his house to kill him. Michael forged an adversary in the fires of his own vindictiveness and hatred. He gave Eric a reason to feel aggrieved, which is all Eric needed to construct a complex homicidal plan. Michael did not appreciate the destructive power of narcissism because his own narcissism blocked it from his view. Those are my thoughts in the case of Eric Lyle Williams. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.